Good morning. Today we're going to finish Amos chapter 1, verses 9 through 10. This is part 2. The last lesson we spoke a little bit about Tyre. The city-state of Tyre today is in the country of Lebanon. But in ancient biblical times, Tyre was in the country of Phoenicia. Tyre's sister city was Sidon. Now a tremendous amount of time can be spent on Phoenicia and Tyre, and all the biblical accounts that are recorded of these two localities, but to remain in the context, which is the burden, the destruction that came upon Tyre, as prophesied in Amos, we're just going to leave it just enough to get the gist of the destruction of Tyre. So I'm purposefully going to leave out a lot of historical events that pertain to Tyre. I'm going to leave them out because there's a time and a place for the expansion of topics, whether people, places, or things. We just need to stay in the lane of the verse the lesson calls for. Also, for time's sake, so we can move along in Amos, I recommend, if you haven't, to listen to last week's lesson, part 1 of Tyre, because we went over many of verses that gave clarity as to the brotherly relationship, the brotherly covenant of sorts, that the king of Tyre, Hiram, had with King David, as well as with his son, King Solomon. So Amos chapter 1, verses 9 and 10. Thus saith the Lord, for 3 transgressions of Tyre, and for 4, I will not turn away or revoke punishment thereof, because they delivered up the whole captivity to Edom, and remembered not the brotherly covenant. But I will send a fire on the wall of Tyre, which shall devour the palaces thereof. Now just real quick, if part 1 was not heard, this may seem as an incomplete lesson. This is part 2, you see. So Tyre, they dispatched and received ships for commerce, the greatest of ancient times in its dealings with Mediterranean countries. Tyre was fat. It had much pride, and for good reason. They were like today's Amazon. They were the Amazon of ancient times. They had and could ship the needs of many all over. They were an impressive, wealthy city, this Tyre. Tyre had good, wholesome relationship with Israel. And we read in verses from Scripture back in part 1, in 1 Kings, the king of Tyre, Hiram, was a friend to both King David and his wise son, King Solomon. And Solomon himself made a covenant with King Hiram of Tyre. And I assume the covenant, from what we read, clearly that they would look out. They would take care for one another, look out for one another. They wouldn't attack one another. And there was peace in Solomon's day. And King Hiram, he provided all the materials that would be used in the erection of King Solomon's temple. Let's just quickly read that account for accuracy. In 1 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 18. And Hiram, king of Tyre, heard that Solomon had been anointed king to succeed his father David. He sent his envoys to Solomon, because he had always been on friendly terms with David. Solomon sent back this message to Hiram. You know that because of the wars waged against my father David from all sides, he could not build a temple for the name of the Lord his God, until the Lord put his enemies under his feet. But now the Lord God has given me rest on every side, and there is no adversary or disaster. I intend, therefore, to build a temple for the name of the Lord my God, as the Lord told my father David, when he said, Your son, whom I will put on the throne in your place, will build the temple for my name. So give orders that cedars of Lebanon be cut for me. My men will work with yours, and I will pay you for your men whatever wages you set. You know that we have no one so skilled in felling timber as the Sidonians, When Hiram heard Solomon's message, he was greatly pleased and said, "Praise be to the Lord today, for he has given David a wise son to rule over this great nation." So Hiram sent word to Solomon, "I have received the message you sent me, and will do all you want in providing the cedar and juniper logs. My men will haul them down from Lebanon to the Mediterranean Sea, and I will float them as rafts by sea to the place you specify. There I will separate them, and you can take them away. And you are to grant my wish by providing food for my royal household." In this way, Hiram kept Solomon supplied with all the cedar and juniper logs he wanted. And Solomon gave Hiram 20,000 cores of wheat, or 3,600 tons of wheat, as food for his household, in addition to 20,000 baths of pressed olive oil. That's about 120,000 gallons. Solomon continued to do this for Hiram year after year. The Lord gave Solomon wisdom, just as he had promised him. There were peaceful relations between Hiram and Solomon, and the two of them made a treaty. King Solomon conspired laborers from all of Israel. King Solomon conscripted laborers from all of Israel, 30,000 men. He sent them off to Lebanon in shifts of 10,000 a month, so that they spent 1 month in Lebanon and 2 months at home. Adoniram is the name here, was in charge of the forced labor. Solomon had 70,000 carriers and 80,000 stonecutters in the hills, as well as 3,300 foremen who supervised the projects and directed the workers. At the king's command, they removed from the quarry large blocks of high-grade stone to provide a foundation of dressed stone for the temple. The craftsmen of Solomon and Hiram and the workers of Byblos cut and prepared the timber and stone for the building of the temple. Sounds like a brotherly covenant, eh? The scripture we just read said there was peace. The two made a treaty. Well, old Tyre offered all these building materials and food. Tyre offered all these laborers, and they also offered a snare. Tyre offered Solomon everything he needed for the temple, as well as a snare. See, King Solomon compromised his faith in God. He was seduced by the women of Tyre. And by and through these unladylike harlots, King Solomon was encouraged to build false gods, altars to false gods within the nation of Israel, that ultimately led to the division of the kingdom and God's judgment. But back to Tyre. Jezebel was a daughter of Tyre, and she was given up to Israel. I'll tell you, in Ezekiel 28, if y'all will make a note of that, is a good chapter to read in your spare reading time. Ezekiel 28, dealing with a prophecy against the king of Tyre. Now this morning we'll read the account of Isaiah 23, a prophecy against Tyre. So let's read Isaiah 23. Wail, you ships of Tarshish, for Tyre is destroyed and left without house or harbor. From the land of Cyprus, word has come to them. Be silent, you people of the island, and you merchants of Sidon, whom the seafarers have enriched. On the great waters came the grain of Shihor. The harvest of the Nile was the revenue of Tyre, and she became the marketplace of the nations. Be ashamed, Sidon, and you fortress of the sea. For the sea has spoken. I have neither reared sons nor brought up daughters. Now this is poetry now. When word comes to Egypt, they will be in anguish at the report of Tyre. Cross over to Tarshish. Wail, you people of the island. Is this your city of revelry? The old, old city, whose feet have taken her to settle in far-off lands? Who planned this against Tyre, the bestower of crowns, whose merchants are princes, whose traders are renowned in the earth? Who planned this against Tyre? The Lord Almighty planned it, to bring down her pride in all her splendor, and to humble all who are renowned on the earth. Till your land as they do along the Nile, daughter Tarshish, for you no longer have a harbor. The Lord has stretched out his hand over the sea and made its kingdoms tremble. He has given an order concerning Phoenicia, that her fortresses be destroyed. He said, no more of your reveling, virgin daughter of Sidon, now crushed. Up, cross over to Cyprus. Even there you'll find no rest. Look at the land of the Babylonians, this people that is now of no account. The Assyrians have made it a place for desert creatures. They raised up their siege towers. They stripped its fortresses bare and turned it into ruin. Wail, you ships of Tarshish, your fortresses is destroyed. At that time, Tyre will be forgotten for 70 years, the span of a king's life. But at the end of these 70 years, it will happen to Tyre, as in the song of the prostitute. Take up a harp, walk through the city, you forgotten prostitute. Play the harp well, sing many a song, so that you will be remembered. At the end of 70 years, the Lord will deal with Tyre. She will return to her lucrative prostitution and will ply her trade with all the kingdoms on the face of the earth. Yet her profit and her earnings will be set apart for the Lord. They will not be stored up or hoarded. Her profits will go to those who live before the Lord for abundant food and fine clothes. So to give an in a nutshell history of Tyre's downfalls is when the Assyrians conquered Tyre, they were conquered and rose again. The Babylonians came and conquered Tyre, but they rose again. Then the Medes Persians conquered Tyre. Tyre rose again, but finally Alexander came, and the Greeks conquered them, and Tyre was brought to utter destruction. Alexander the Great, he built a siege ramp, a ramp that connected Tyre to the mainland. The engineers in Alexander's army built a causeway by piling up timber, piling up stone and rubble, all on top of one another, onto an existing sandbar. And that was all done without modern machinery. It's an amazing feat. It was mainly done by humans and the power of animals. So I realize that so much can be said on the destruction of Tyre, and how and how the topography has changed since ancient days till now. But this verse in Amos, it just doesn't require too much of the history of Tyre. We did enough to explain the destruction of Tyre in Amos chapter 1, verses 9 through 10. So we'll move along here in Amos. Till next time.